Attendee. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's PSC's webinar. We're just going to wait a few more seconds as folks continue to enter the room, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, again, welcome everyone to today's webinar on the PSC Packaging Pledge and how it can benefit your business. My name is John Spearman. I'm a project manager for PSC. I'm glad to be here with you to talk about the Packaging Pledge. However, before we jump into that subject, we'd like to ask you to answer our first poll question of the day, which, there it is. How would you rate the prioritization of sustainable packaging at your company? And while we do that, while you guys answer that question, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about PSC. For those who might be joining us for the first time, PSC is a nonprofit organization founded in 2013. Our mission is to advance business through environmental and social practices, and we have a vision for a vibrant and collaborative pet industry that has a positive impact on the communities where we do business. We are a movement of retailers, distributors, manufacturers, and brands coming together to measure, improve, and celebrate our environmental and social impact. Originally founded with 8 companies, we are now a global organization with nearly 200 members on every continent except Antarctica. And after that, I'm just going to take a quick pause here and look at the poll. So it looks like highest priority is 3rd on the list, behind it's just packaging being a high priority versus a moderate priority. So thank you. It's informative to see where your heads are at before we start today's presentation. Just a little bit more about PSC. Before we jump in, we have 2 primary ways that we work as an organization. First is to support our members like you on their sustainability journey and improve through and present improvement through member benefits. Our next major area of focus is collaboration within the industry that impact everyone on issues that are too big for one company to address on their own. And on the right side of the screen, you can see 3 areas or 3 initiatives that we've identified as core for our company. That's sustainable proteins, sustainable packaging, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, before we jump in a little bit further, just a little reminder of today's webinar etiquette. We will leave microphones and videos off. There's a Q&A section at the bottom, or where you can please put in your question and answers. We will have about 10-minute question and answer period at the end of today's webinar. Please use the chat box feature as well. There will be PSC staff monitoring that. And the recording and slides from today's webinar will be available to all registrants after the call. So for today's webinar, I would like to introduce you all to Caitlin Dudas. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Pet Sustainability Coalition, as well as Caroline James, the director of sustainability for Atlantic Packaging. Caitlin, I will hand it off to you.
Well, John, thanks so much for getting us started. And Caroline, thanks so much for joining us from Atlantic Packaging. So the Pet Sustainability Coalition, as John mentioned, has been focusing on sustainable packaging as one of our key priorities for the industry, really looking at what are those pieces of impact that are large for our industry at large, and how do we bring companies together to address them. I'm so really excited today to share more about the PSC Packaging Pledge, which is one of several sustainable packaging initiatives, and also really excited to be joined by Caroline. Caroline and Atlantic Packaging actually donated a full downloadable business case that's available to all of our member companies so they can truly understand how to present the business case of sustainable packaging, whether that's your CEO, your CFO, your chief sustainability officer, but how do you understand and create a business case that really helps your company make this commitment moving forward? So really excited after I share a little bit about the basics of the PSC Packaging Pledge, why we're doing it, and what the benefits of the Packaging Pledge are. I'm going to hand it over to Caroline, and then Caroline will hand it back to me. I'll talk about what signatories we already have as an organization. We're very excited that 7 of our member companies have signed on to the pledge, as well as the cost to participate and what next steps look like. All right, so without further ado, I will go ahead and share screen. And jump in. All right, I assume that everyone can see my presentation. And we are going to be talking about the PSC Packaging Pledge, which is the pet industry's pathway towards sustainable packaging by 2025. So I'm going to give you just 4 stats. Those give you a background about why it is that we're focusing on sustainable packaging. So first of all, just to get some context, right? We are the pet industry, an enormous industry, actually twice the size of the baby industry, more than $100 billion in annual revenue, set to double by 2030, which isn't very far from now. And already the pet industry accounts for about 3% of all the flexible packaging made in the United States. It represents over $1 billion revenue stream and market overall. Of our packaging footprint, we have lots of different types of packaging, but we create one of the hardest to recycle types of packaging that we create is that multi-laminate flexible packaging, which is used in 99% of pet food and treat bags. So as an industry, we make more than 300 million pounds of pet food packaging, and 99% of that today is going to a landfill. We're also in so many homes, right? So our waste is now found in more than 70% of US households. That's the majority of American households that are dealing with our packaging on a regular basis. But we also know that packaging and plastic packaging has a lot of potential. We know that it's lighter weight, and it's more affordable than most other types of packaging. That means because it's lighter weight, it has a lower carbon footprint when we ship it around to different locations. We also know that because it's lower cost, there are opportunities for equitable access to products that we can serve all communities, regardless of income level or location, by being able to package our products in durable plastic that maintains the quality and shelf life and durability at a lower cost. Now, unfortunately, because most plastics that are used in the pet industry, and again, going back to those pet food and treat bags, which is the majority of our packaging, those packages are thrown away. 99% of them go in a landfill, which means you only have the single-use plastic, right? So if you can imagine that $1 billion that literally goes through a system, and because it's managed linearly, we're not capturing any of that through the back end when we use recycling or other ways to think of a circular model. So you're not creating products, using them, and then disposing of them, but how do we bring those products right back in so that we can continue to derive value from our investment in developing them and keep them in a circular model where there's actually a market to collect them. So we know that if we are able to achieve this circularity, we dramatically decrease our environmental impact and we recover a much higher percentage of that economic value. So that is an explanation of just some of the basics, right? What are we looking at in terms of our packaging footprint as the pet industry, but not just our impact, because our impact really equates to an opportunity. And the pet industry isn't alone in recognizing this opportunity to start to transform packaging towards a more circular model. So what I wanted to do was show a quick 90-second video from the US Plastics Pact around sustainable packaging and how they're addressing this problem globally, which is in direct alignment with the PSC Packaging Pledge. Let's take a look. So what we can see is that the world is taking an approach to sustainable packaging. They're starting to address this problem of plastic waste, and enormous companies and organizations are putting efforts toward this. You saw that the US Plastics Pact is built by the Recycling Partnership and the World Wildlife Fund, the largest nonprofit organization in the world, funded by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and these enormous organizations that are really helping to address and deliver solutions to our plastics problem. But overall, the pet industry has been slow to act. And so we wanted to dive a little deeper. Why? What are the challenges? What are the barriers that the pet industry is facing that we, in our unique role as the Pet Sustainability Coalition, might have an opportunity to help address? So when we went out, you can see our membership base is around 200 member companies. Our goal was really to understand what are those barriers. And when we asked, these 5 key points rose to the top. One is that many pet companies rely on part-time staff to be advancing their sustainable packaging initiatives, whether it's their sustainability person or one person in their product development team that focuses on packaging, but it may not be their full-time specialty. The second is that many companies assume that we need to wait on technology. We're waiting, whether it's to have curbside at our local home where we can put in flexible packaging, or we think, hey, this is only available for small bags and really won't work for the formats. We've been able to identify that actually all of the technology needed to move toward more sustainable packaging is available in the marketplace today. We also hear that packaging suppliers are the primary source of information. And there's a lot of packaging suppliers out there, and they may be interested in promoting the solution that their company has developed. And so really looking at the opportunities to provide more scientific, objective information to the pet industry as well. A lot of companies don't have a clear goal. They know, hey, sustainable packaging is important to our business and it's really important to our customers and our retail partners, but we don't really know how to articulate what the specific goal should be or how to execute against that goal. And many companies also assume that sustainable packaging is cost prohibitive. So recognizing that these are all the challenges that our pet industry faces, the Pet Sustainability Coalition has aligned with what the US Plastics Pact goal is to move toward 100% recyclable, refillable, or compostable, but also to deliver a program that gives the tools and the resources to address every single one of these challenges that are specific to the pet industry. And that is why we have developed the PSC Packaging Pledge. Again, in alignment, it is the pet industry's pathway towards sustainable packaging with the focus on refillable, recyclable, and compostable. But it also pulls not just from what's happening externally, using these consultants that have helped to develop these international and global programs, companies like the US Plastics Pact, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Closed Loop, the Recycling Partnership, the World Wildlife Fund, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, the American Bottlers Association, Loop, TREAC, Engineered Plastics, EcoCycle, really going out there and as an organization talking with all of the stakeholders that participate in the packaging process and really developing this program in partnership with them, and at the same time holding the challenges that are unique to the pet industry to develop this program to address all of those various elements. And so when we developed the signatory benefits, we came up with 6 clear key benefits that are different, but help companies to align with the US Plastics Pact commitment. So the first, and what I'm gonna do before I hand it over to Caroline, is I'm gonna touch briefly on each of these 6 key benefits, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Caroline, who's really gonna do a deep dive on the business case. Again, this is a free tool that's available for companies to download and to kind of cut and paste and choose which pieces they think are going to be most prominent in their business and really tell the story well. But Caroline is going to do a great deep dive in that. And so I will touch briefly on these 6 and then hand it over to her. So just briefly, all 6 are first, the packaging benchmarking and reporting tools, business case support, legislative updates, understanding what's the cost to our business to not taking action, what are the fees that we might expect for extended producer responsibility or EPR, plastic packaging tax, things that are regionally very different across different regions, peer working groups, companies having the opportunity to work together, as well as our supplier marketplace, which is one of our highest demanded signatory benefits. So first, I want to cover benchmark and reporting. We are lucky enough to be an accelerator with the Plastics IQ tool, which is a third-party web-based platform that helps companies to assess their current portfolio, to set goals and build and model solutions so that they can see what their impact is with every single improvement that they make. To compare the effectiveness of the different changes that they might make within their packaging portfolio, and then to submit that as a baseline and a kind of initial report on our current performance and where we're getting by 2025. As I mentioned, we're a catalyst along with other incredible organizations, whether that's Happy Family or Kellogg's or the Sustainability Consortium in partnership with Walmart and the Recycling Partnership, as well as Systemic, which is that back-end tech support partner. And so this is a constantly evolving. I've been lucky enough to see additional versions and added tools and resources as this goes along, but this is now up and running and is an incredible tool to help companies start benchmarking and reporting progress today. The supplier marketplace. So apologize, I recognize that image is a little bit blurry, but this is meant to just kind of illustrate what the supplier marketplace is. This is really a vetted marketplace that helps our signatories identify suppliers that are already able to meet these needs for recyclable, refillable, or compostable. But we know that's not the only thing that companies need to know as they're making transitions toward sustainable packaging suppliers. So it will also include data on the size offerings, the order minimums, where their manufacturing locations are, the environmental programs that they may have on site, the certifications that they've achieved, drop test scores, durability ratings, all of those pieces that are critical elements to deciding and identifying packaging suppliers. We're also not trying to go between our signatories and suppliers. And so this will be kind of that first opportunity to review a variety of different suppliers and then really develop those relationships and dig into things like spec sheets and pricing independently of the PET Sustainability Coalition. Peer working groups. We also think this is essential. So our companies can work together. These are actually launching in just a few weeks. We'll start with baselining and benchmarking where we are today, but collaborative problem solving, understanding how as a team we can accelerate the learning process, any additional testing that's needed. How do we work together as a collaborative group to minimize the cost and time that it's going to take to achieve this goal? There will be peer learning opportunities. It will help these signatories to really sustain progress and to develop that professional network amongst sustainability and packaging professionals as well. Legislative updates. So we know that this is changing all the time. It is so rapid that we believe that every 6 months we're going to need to give an update on packaging legislation, how it's changing, where regulation is changing, taxing and fees. And so we'll expect this to be biannual updates against multiple regions, whether it's you're creating and selling into North America, Europe, Asia, South America. And so really helping these signatories understand that shifting landscape. Marketing assets. We also know that as companies are making this incredible commitment towards sustainable packaging, their customers want to know about it. And that's because customers are really looking to align their shopping patterns with their values. And Caroline's going to go a little into this as well. But in order to help our signatories really build their brand as they become a signatory with the PSC Packaging Pledge, they get their badge, they get social templates, and then also social media and direct email promotion from us, but a whole kit of digital assets that they can share with their consumer base as well. The final piece here is the business case support, and I'm going to hand it shortly over to Caroline. She's going to go over 3 key areas: the financial rationale, the social rationale, and the scientific rationale of what is the business case for moving toward recyclable, refillable, or compostable. And when Caroline finishes up, we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the cost structure for the program, who's signed up, and what we see coming up next. Caroline, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Let's just get this set up for y'all. Okay, so as Caitlin mentioned, my name is Caroline James. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Atlantic Packaging. Being the Director of Sustainability has honestly always been my dream job. I was asked to help put together this business case for PSC because this is a conversation that I'm having with our customers every day to talk about why bother with this? Like, we know that there's a problem out there, but we also know that it's really hard to solve. There's no silver bullet in sustainable packaging. If there were, we all would have found it already. So we know that this is hard. But my background is in industrial ecology and business. Industrial ecology, I would describe as the science behind the circular economy, and then kind of combining that with the business side. I really try to think about what are the sustainability and business trade-offs towards making these decisions. So as Caitlin mentioned, this business case is available as a free download, and it's really designed for you to either use all, as one kit and caboodle if you want to, or you can pull individual bullets and pieces out of it that you think will help you make the strongest case to your leadership or others that you may need to persuade about why you should be thinking about sustainable packaging. So this business case is relatively text heavy. I'm not going to go through every bullet, but I want to give you kind of a high level overview of what's in here so that you can see what you can pull from if you want to. So first page, you just get like a nice one-pager executive summary, and we will walk through the three major sets of rationale: the social rationale, the scientific rationale, and the financial rationale about why move to sustainable packaging. And then it ends with some more information about overall recommendations, including reasonings to sign on to the PSC Packaging Pledge. So without further ado, I'll walk through this a little bit and just give you a sense of what's in here. Something that was really important to us when putting this together is that you have sources available in all of this, since there are a lot of stats thrown around in the environmental movement, and often it's really helpful to be able to dive in and understand more. So all of these bullet points are sourced if you want to learn more about what's in them. Most of the people on this call, I imagine, are pretty familiar already with the environmental issue that's driving this discussion in the first place. But a lot of people that you're talking to might not be. But it's great to just start with the basic explanation of the fact that there is a global crisis of plastics and packaging waste. Sometimes people equate the plastics crisis with the packaging crisis, and obviously they're deeply intertwined, but there is, a packaging problem that doesn't just concern plastics. We're trying to figure out how to deal with all kinds of materials, from paper to glass to aluminum and everything in between. But one of the stats that I find really impactful to use in these conversations is this third one here in the first section, that packaging is the largest contributor to plastic waste. And this makes sense considering that the useful life of packaging is so short most of the time, and so we're throwing a lot of it away. As Caitlin alluded to earlier, the PET industry is part of that problem. We're talking about 300 million pounds per year in the US alone. And so this is a problem that no one industry can say, oh, well, we're kind of excused from this. We're not the problem. It's going to be incumbent upon all of us to be thinking about this, including the PET industry. And then the last piece that I think can be really useful to bring into conversations is the fact that waste issues are also fundamentally climate issues. It can be easy to kind of compartmentalize those in different places, like climate is about these emissions and about energy, and the waste issue is about plastics and littering and what's going on in the oceans and things like that. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, like all things in sustainability, everything is intertwined. And we know that 45% of global emissions come from emissions associated with making products and food, including packaging. So packaging and overuse of packaging is a climate issue. And we also know that actual waste, including packaging waste, is a climate issue as well. Landfills emit methane, a greenhouse gas that's about 30 times more powerful as CO2. It captures 30 times more heat, basically. And so throwing things away in landfills is a huge contributor to climate change. So thinking about ways that we can be diverting packaging from landfills into recycling or into reuse or into compost is a really important opportunity to be thinking also about climate mitigation strategies. And a lot of companies and a lot of the member companies of PSC have really ambitious climate goals, and it can be helpful to think of the packaging issue as a way to also be addressing your climate goals as well. Okay, so let's talk about the social rationale. We know that consumers are aware of the packaging issue. What's kind of interesting about the waste crisis as opposed to the climate crisis is a lot of consumers aren't actively every day thinking about the climate crisis because they don't necessarily see it. It's very ephemeral, right? Like we can't see these carbon dioxide concentrations that are in the air, but people do see photos of turtles with straws in their noses, and they do see things that clue them into the fact that we do have a waste crisis worldwide. So it's interesting that plastic pollution is ranked among the top 3 environmental issues globally by consumers, and consumers are viewing plastic as a harmful component. Now, obviously, consumers don't always have the most nuanced points of view about the ways that plastic in some ways can be a more sustainable choice over some other materials. For example, Caitlin was mentioning things like lowering transit emissions because the packaging is lightweight. Like consumers aren't always thinking about that, but they are thinking about the packaging issue, and they've started to associate plastic and packaging in general with environmental degradation. We also know specifically that pet parents prefer sustainable brands and are making decisions in part based on sustainable packaging. So in this middle column, you can see some useful stats about the percent of pet parents who feel more favorable towards brands that are taking sustainability seriously. One of the interesting bullets is this third one, that 45% of pet care product buyers said seeing 100% recyclable has a high impact when choosing a brand of dry pet food. And then lastly, on the right, there's evidence to suggest that consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable products and packaging. Now, there are a whole host of different studies about this. Some of them suggest that consumers say that they're willing to pay more, but then in actuality don't. So I think it's important to be thinking about, what consumers say versus what they actually do. But it does seem important to notice that consumers are telling us, yes, we are willing to pay more, not only for sustainable products, but for those products to come in more sustainable packaging. I think it's also helpful to note this last bullet, that about 35% of US consumers say that they would buy more products in sustainable packaging if they were more available. A lot of times right now, there just isn't a great diversity of consumer choice, in part because we've become really reliant on certain high-performing materials. And then let's get into the scientific rationale. This links, back into what we were talking about originally with the environmental problem, but kind of linking this back to what's relevant to pet parents. It's helpful to think about the fact that plastics in our oceans harm millions of animals a year, and pet parents obviously have a love of animals, and they see this harm as incongruous with being a pet parent. It isn't just thinking of these classic examples, like I mentioned, of turtles with straws in their noses, but it's incredible that some studies are finding that 90% of seabirds and 52% of turtle species have consumed plastic. We're talking about plastic waste killing 1 million seabirds and 100,000 sea mammals every year. And since packaging is the largest contributor to plastic waste and to mismanaged plastic waste that winds up in our lakes, rivers, and oceans, this is a huge concern for people who care about animals. Even if packaging doesn't wind up in the oceans, as I mentioned, when it winds up in landfills, that's not an awesome outcome for nature or for animals either. I mentioned the methane issue, but it's also interesting how landfills tend to attract animals to them kind of in negative ways. Like we see migratory species of birds that stop over at landfills and then don't continue their journeys because they're picking through things in landfills, and it can alter ecosystems altogether to have landfills. So the more that we can get away from relying on landfills as part of our waste management infrastructure, the better. And then we also know that there are solutions out there. We can move to more circular materials like those that are compostable or recyclable to reduce that ocean plastic pollution landfill use and resource use more generally. Part of this is thinking about where do these materials come from when we are using excessive amounts of fiber-based packaging, for example. How does that affect the habitats where that packaging comes from? When we are sourcing petroleum-based plastics, what kind of ecosystems are disrupted from having to extract that petroleum in the first place? So everything from the beginning of life of this packaging to the end of life in landfills, incinerators, in the ocean, et cetera, pose threats to animals that pet parents don't love. And then lastly, let's talk about the financial rationale. So pet care companies that are using sustainable packaging are seeing more sales growth. I definitely did a double take at these numbers when I first saw them, but it's incredible that products that claim to use sustainable packaging have seen sales growth of 769% in just the past 2 years alone. We are seeing claims of sustainable packaging explode, in part because we know that that consumers buy them. So it can be really helpful to say, even if you, the leadership of our company, don't care about this for the environmental reasons or what have you, there are opportunities to increase profits here. So that's kind of the carrot approach. More of the stick approach is thinking about the fact that companies that don't act may lose out to the competition that does and face financial repercussions as a result. Almost all the top 50 CPG companies have some sort of plastic packaging reduction initiatives, and pet care companies have told PSC that they are seeing increased demand for sustainable products and packaging. And then lastly, Caitlin was alluding to this from the legislative point of view, but in this box on the right, you get some more information about kind of the legislative stick in this equation as well. So as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, for those of you who are more US focused, we have seen 4 extended producer responsibility, or EPR, laws for packaging passed in the US in the last 2 years. Those are in Maine, Oregon, Colorado, and California. California has been getting the most attention since it's such a gigantic economy, but we think that this is a trend that's going to continue over the next several years. 16 states have introduced packaging EPR legislation in 2022 alone. And for those who haven't heard about EPR before, basically how this is going to manifest is that companies are going to be charged fees based on the amount of packaging that they sell into a given economy. So into the California economy, the Colorado economy, et cetera. And in theory, those fees will be higher for difficult to recycle or difficult to dispose packaging. So we think that there will be higher fees for flexible packaging, flexible plastic packaging that's really hard to recycle. Probably lower fees for paper-based or compostable packaging. We don't have a lot of those fee structures yet. These are all now in the implementation phase, so I can't tell you exactly what those fee structures are going to look like, but that is generally the sense that we have. And what's exciting about this, at least from our point of view, we're really excited about these EPR laws, is we think that it'll help level the playing field for more sustainable packaging choices. So that if something right now comes at a 1.5 times premium for a sustainable material, that maybe once you take EPR fees into consideration, maybe that option looks a little bit better. So for those of us who are really trying to get more sustainable materials on the market, these EPR laws are really exciting. Packaging EPR laws exist in other countries and municipalities. I know that they exist throughout many parts of Canada, and parts of Europe. And of course, there will be other legislative levers that are going to incentivize companies to be thinking about sustainable packaging as well. And being part of the PSC Packaging Pledge can help you stay abreast of what that legislation is. So basically, the recommendations are pretty simple. Getting the leadership of your company to mitigate risk by committing to invest in sustainable packaging options is obviously the first step. As I mentioned, we don't have a silver bullet yet. There isn't really something here where we can say, we recommend that you move to this kind of packaging for all of your applications. That wouldn't be realistic, but looking at each application, each SKU, and thinking about how can we improve this. that is an incredible place to start. And then secondly, of course, one of the other recommendations is to sign on to the Packaging Pledge and transition to 100% recyclable, refillable, or compostable packaging by 2025. And Caitlin will touch a little bit more on what it looks like to sign up for the pledge in just a few minutes. Just as a little bit of background as to who we are, like how we got involved with all of this. So Atlantic is the largest privately owned packaging company in North America. We serve customers throughout all kinds of different industries, including the pet care industry. But as I mentioned, we really wanted to donate this business case because it's really important to us that we become the sustainable packaging provider especially in North America. We're mostly US focused. And so being able to help our customers find the rationale to be moving in this direction is important to us. And we think that we can make your jobs easier by helping to make that business case for you. So we are mostly a distributor. And what I like about that from a sustainability point of view is that means that I get to help our customers source the most sustainable options for them, regardless of what the material is. So I'm not bound to tell a customer that they should be using X material just because we happen to sell it. We have a whole network of suppliers that we pull from, so that what works for selling poultry obviously doesn't work for selling cosmetics. And so we need really different kinds of materials and formats and price points depending on what the industry is. So in a lot of ways, what you have with Atlantic is a series of packaging consultants and sustainability consultants who are one tool to help you with this journey. There are obviously a lot of really great companies out there that are working on these issues. We primarily focus on secondary and tertiary packaging. So if that's something that we can be helpful with, like, feel free to let us know. I'm located in our Charlotte, North Carolina office, where we also have our solutions center. We do a lot of packaging design and testing in this facility, including like drop testing and redesign to totally curbside recyclable formats, stretch wrap testing, transit testing. It's an ISTA certified lab. I will stop there. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are, because there's a good chance that you've never heard of us before. But if you think Atlantic could be helpful in starting your journey towards sustainable packaging, we're happy to help. And even if we can't, I'm happy to try to point you in the direction of someone who can. So thank you, PSC, for having me and letting me be involved in this business case. I really hope that it is helpful to those of you on this call. Happy to take questions at the end.
Well, Caroline, thank you so much for giving a great rundown on each of those different rationales. And I think it's an incredible resource for all companies to use to start to develop the case to move towards sustainable packaging. So whether you can commit to the packaging pledge today or next year or not at all, if you can advance in any direction, we always support sustainability improvement. Don't let improvement get in the way of perfection. And Caroline, your contributions to this are incredibly useful to this industry. So thank you so much. All right, I am going to jump into the final piece here. Just keeping an eye on time to make sure. It looks like we're doing pretty well on our timeline. But what I'm going to go over next is really so we're going to touch briefly. We reviewed all of the benefits. Now we're going to talk about what are the costs to join the program, as well as who's on board and where are we going next. So as a reminder, in order to become a signatory of the Packaging Pledge, you must make a public commitment to move toward recyclable, refillable, and compostable packaging by 2025. It is not a legally binding document. Our goal is really to help every company move as quickly as possible in this direction, and also understand that there is no silver bullet solution. And so we are so excited that so many companies are ready to jump on board, knowing that there isn't a perfect solution out there, but there is recyclable, refillable, and compostable solutions in almost every format we're using today. All right, so we have covered all of the benefits, for companies that are ready to sign that public pledge. They get access to all of these signatory benefits on an annual basis. And here's the program fees. So I wanted to share this with all companies. However, this is an exclusive members only program. So that means for companies to access this program, you do first need to become a member of our organization. We have 4 membership levels with a variety of different benefits that you can choose that are best for your company. But once you become a member, you can then become a signatory of the PSC Packaging Pledge. So like with many of our programs, the fees that you see here are really revenue-based fees. This is our commitment to creating equitable access within the industry where businesses of all different sizes can really afford really high quality tools and resources and programming to help them advance their sustainable impact. And so you can see here on the right that revenue-based model. Our ICON members, that's our top tier members, do get free access for the first year to this program, and recognizing that this is a 2025 commitment, right? So this isn't just a program that PSC is building for 2023 or 2024. We know we need to get to 2025, and sustainability is really about a commitment to continuous improvement, which means there will be packaging programming, all throughout PSC's member experience here. I think the other thing that's really important to understand is that this program is donor funded. So we have 3 primary donors today. Those are Van Fu Packaging, Earth Animal, and Tyler Packaging. And these really help us to lower the cost of this program and support PSC's costs to develop these incredible suite of benefits as well. So as it stands today, about 50% of the total cost of this program by the organization is funded by our donors. So I just want to express great gratitude to these funders. If there are others who are interested in helping to support this project, please reach out to us as well. So I wanted to share some of the success. Some of you may have been able to join us at Super Zoo for our big public media launch event, which was incredibly exciting. We had 5 companies join us and their executive team and their sustainability team to become public signatories. And today we are at 7 total companies. So we launched this very recently, less than 90 days ago. We just passed the 90-day mark. And we now have these incredible signatories: Canaday, Instinct, Open Farm, Ferapet, Earth Animal, Petcurian, and Primal. And on the right, you also see our incredible funders who participated in that event and have really helped to generously support the development of this program as well. Now, when I think about our opportunity here to have companies come together and to make this signatory pledge, I was really inspired by Christine's comments at Super Zoo. If you didn't get a chance to attend, I just really wanted to share that because what it talks about is the importance of this group of first leaders. So what she says is making a public pledge is not an easy thing to do when you don't have a bulletproof plan of how you're going to get there. But the sheer passion of our team to do better and be better for the planet outweighs all of those uncertainties. By signing this public pledge, we really feel that we're demonstrating Petcurian's commitment to pets, people, and planet. Now, what I love about this sentiment is the recognition that there isn't a silver bullet solution, but also recognizing that the benefits and the potential to make impact really outweighs all of those uncertainties. And so I am so honored that 7 incredibly prominent, well-known companies who even compete with each other, have really come together to help pioneer this path forward. As an organization, we want to be at least 10 companies by the end of the year, 25 companies by next year, and ultimately have a goal of impacting and influencing the majority of packaging created by the pet industry. And so we believe that the PSC Packaging Pledge is an incredible program and a step in that direction. So if you're ready to take action, a couple of options. First of all, if you're not a member, you need to take a look at our membership page and join the organization. If you are a member and you're ready to get started, here's an email address. You can email packaging@petsustainability.org. Or if you just want to learn more information or share some of what you heard today, you can share the recorded Zoom webinar, and you can also visit petsustainability.org/PSC Packaging Pledge to get more information. Now, I see there's a bunch of questions in the Q&A and some chat activity as well. So I'm going to hand it back to John on our team and we'll field some questions.
Thank you, Caitlin and Caroline, for that wonderful presentation. Like you said, there are a few questions, so we'll jump into it here. Let's see, the first one. This has been a concern and conundrum since starting my herbal business about 30 years ago. How can a very small company compete with MOQs, which I believe are minimum order quantities, when MOQs are huge for sustainable packaging?
So I can try to jump in with this. I've heard this from a few companies now where they tried, a few years ago to get on the sustainability bandwagon and found themselves blocked for whatever reason. The pace of change is so rapid now that I think that you will probably find that the environment has become more favorable since you tried it last time. So many companies are getting pressure from retailers and from consumers to make these changes that I've found that companies are more willing to make this change. So, I mean, even for example, this morning I was talking to the people who make Q-tips, and they come in these like plastic sleeves and like blister packs and stuff. And Costco is telling them, you have to get rid of this plastic. So it's not coming from the company, it's coming from Costco. Costco is the one telling them, like, you need to figure this out. And so I found that there's just been more willingness to engage in the sustainable packaging conversation because of those supply chain pressures. In terms of the minimum order quantities, I've also found that those are starting to come down too. There are more smaller companies that are beginning to offer lower MOQs. I know that we offer lower MOQs on some items like e-commerce, mailers, things like that are completely fiber-based and are recyclable, in part because, as you can imagine, packaging companies are seeing that that a lot of the smaller companies are more like mission-based and they want to adopt these sustainable packaging practices. So we as packaging companies can't have these gigantic MOQs if we want to capture you as customers. So I think we're seeing those MOQs come down. That's obviously not universally true, but I think it'll be better than when you tried it 15 years ago.
Great, thank you. Let's see, the next question. How do we account for the fact that today 100% of packaging is not or will not be recycled, reused, or composted, and the downstream impacts that waste has?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. If the premise of the question is that today there is no recycling or composting, because there are materials that are being effectively recycled. There are plenty of materials that aren't, and there are materials that are composted today. Obviously not as many as we would like, but we're seeing things move in a positive direction. And I do think that things like EPR laws will help make those waste infrastructures more robust. The idea with EPR is that the fees could help fund improvements to the recycling system, to the compost system. The question also mentions that a lot of waste is shipped abroad, a lot of cases to the global south. That is definitely still a problem. It's a little bit less of a problem than it used to be in 2018 when China said that they would stop accepting a lot of the US's recyclables. That kind of changed the movement of some of that waste, but there is some truth to the idea that some waste is getting shipped abroad. Part of what we can do is that waste is only getting shipped abroad if it's low value waste that manufacturers in the US can't make something out of. So the more that we can be using high quality materials that recyclers in the US actually want to recycle and turn into new things, the less that waste is going to be shipped abroad, right? So if our goal for a circular economy is to keep those materials in circulation for longer, then we need to make sure that we're using like valuable materials that can technically be turned into something else. Caitlin, I'm curious if you have anything to add to this question. Those were just kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So we hear from companies often that there's a little hesitation to go ahead and make the change now because they're unclear as to whether or not, because it's still flexible, right? It can't be captured curbside, and how many people are really going to participate in this. And there are, still challenges to collecting 100% of the packaging, regardless of what it's made out of. And I totally understand that challenge. I had actually built a slide today that was kind of the field of dreams, right? Build it and they will come, because it really isn't a chicken or egg conversation, right? Essentially, the recycling system will not collect our materials unless it's high enough value that they can make a living and support their business by collecting that material. And so essentially, what has to come first is higher value packaging in order to fix the broken system that we have today. So I fully understand, that there is a gap, right, between the innovation process and being able to capture all of the packaging and where we are today. But I think the industry needs to be leaders to take responsibility for the waste that we're creating, and to create higher value to fix the problem, and create that market incentive. I think the other piece, I had a second component to what do we do about where we are today. But I think overall, we have, someone can answer or ask differently, or an additional question if we haven't answered that question as was asked. But I think we've kind of talked about the system of recycling and why we have to create higher value to achieve circularity.
Thank you both. Caitlin, where can we find and download the business case support and a copy of today's presentation? Well, today's presentation will be made available to all registrants following the conclusion of today's webinar. But Caitlin,
yeah, we will send out an email that has both things ready, so you'll be able to share this recording, but also get access to that download.
Perfect. And let's see. There's a question here. I'm not quite sure what they're speaking to. I think they might be thinking about the packaging pledge. How does a sustainable, flexible packaging supplier gain access?
Oh, okay. So this question is about who can really participate, which I think is a great question. So all companies can participate in the PSC Packaging Pledge. So today I focused a little bit heavily on multi-laminate plastic packaging, which is often used in food and treats, which you might think, okay, so only consumables companies can participate, but actually everybody uses packaging. For companies that are using rigid materials or paper or fiber-based materials, you are probably closer, right, to achieving 100% recyclable, refillable, or compostable than companies that are a little more challenged with these multi-laminate materials. So companies of all kinds, if you're a retailer, you create or have packaging on site. If you're a distributor, you have packaging. If you are a brand, you have packaging. If you're a supplier, you have packaging. And so all companies can participate in the packaging pledge, and that goes for our international members as well. We talked a lot about framing the problem here in the US, and that's because almost 75% of our member companies are based here in the US. But that doesn't discount our international members, and there are absolute opportunities for them to participate in this. There are US plastics packs in regions all over the world. It's a global movement, and our tools are accessible, as well as our EPR calculator and fee calculators are all global systems as well. Now, specifically, John, I think it was a packaging supplier that was asking, hey, how can we participate in the packaging pledge? I think one of the greatest ways for packaging suppliers to participate is to apply to be included in our packaging marketplace, our supplier marketplace. And that is because the more suppliers that are providing transparent information about their ability to meet this demand, the better able we are to actually shift the industry in this direction. And so we want all packaging suppliers, whether a member or not a member, to apply to be in our marketplace. Those applications are not up and running today, but they should be out before the end of the year, if not in early Q1, because we want the beta of the marketplace to be available before the end of Q1 of 2023. And so packaging suppliers can participate that way specifically.
Great, thank you. Caroline, I have a question for you. Earlier, you mentioned you were a little surprised by the financial implications of switching to sustainable packaging. Is there anything else that kind of jumped out at you when you were putting together this business case?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think one of the I make business case presentations to customers all the time, but I hadn't specifically gotten to give one that was relevant to the pet industry. And so seeing the stats specifically about what pet parents care about and why the environmental issue of the packaging waste problem would be especially relevant to people who care about animals was really exciting to me. You know, a lot of times, like I mentioned with like the Q-tip example earlier, like is the average consumer of Q-tips necessarily thinking about this problem? Like maybe, maybe not, but the average pet parent may be thinking about the implications of climate change and the packaging waste issue on other animals. So that was the new information to me about this developing the business case.
Great. Very interesting. All right. Well, we are at about time and just wanted to launch our last poll of today and just give an overall rating of today's webinar and let you know a little bit about an upcoming event at PSC as well. So let me just share my screen here again. PSC's next webinar will be December 14th, and it's going to be about developing a green team. As you see, we're going to have a guest speaker from Point B, Kevin Wilhelm, and then we'll have two PSC members, member organizations who will join us as well from Phillips and Portland Pet Group to talk about green teams and putting them together and the challenges and everything else that goes along with it. So please just take a moment to answer the poll question. And thank you all again, Caroline and Caitlin, for joining us today. We appreciate all our members who joined as well. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Caroline. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you all.